You're listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. I started this podcast to learn what makes people resilient after challenging events and how they've used those series of events as a catalyst for change in their life. You'll hear stories of resiliency and strength, so get ready, sit back, and be prepared to be inspired. Today I'm speaking to Marlisse Hardamon. She's a survivor, she's a thriver, and she has an amazing story of overcoming sexual abuse to tell us today. So if this topic is really sensitive to you, I just wanted you to be aware of that. And let's get into talking to Marlisse. Well, thank you, Marlisse, for coming on my show, Catalyst for Change Stories. I am so curious about your story and how it really was the catalyst for what you're doing today. Can you tell me a little bit about your story?
Um, my story started from really my childhood. I was born into a domestic violence situation. My father beat my mother 10 inches of her life
Mm,
on a regular basis. He never hit us, he just would beat her um, until she got to the point that she couldn't handle it any longer. And we moved to another city in the middle of the night. She picked us up and, out of our beds, and we left
yeah,
and we moved to the next town without my father and without his knowledge. And
yeah.
we stayed with a friend of hers who had kind of left ahead of us, but she left with her husband. While we were in that town, we were poor. When I say poor, I I really mean when they say dirt poor, we were dirt poor. We had nowhere to live. We didn't have but a suitcase apiece.
Mm,
Um, my mom had a hard time finding a job because all she had ever been was a stay-at-home mom. So I believe that she tolerated a lot of things because it kept a roof over her head. So
okay.
the first year, other than being broke and not having a lot of things,
Yeah.
life was pretty good. Um, and I remember my 8th birthday. Um, my mother said, we're going to have a birthday party for you. And that was really big because that was the first time that I had had a birthday party or anything for me since we left my father. Because when we left him, we left a very middle class existence where he owned businesses, he owned a home, he worked for himself. And when we got there, it was survival.
Yeah.
So it was a big thing for me to have this birthday party. And it wasn't that I could invite friends. It was just me, my sister, the lady that we lived with, their kids. But it was the fact that we decorated the house and we
Oh,
played pin the tail on the donkey, and we actually ate pizza, which probably was the first time I had pizza since leaving my father. And I got my own piece, so that was really awesome. And I remember this, um, a box with a beautiful pink bow on it. And inside of it, it had clothes. Now, the clothes may have came from Kmart, I don't know, but they were new. They weren't something that was handed down to me. And I was so excited. I remember feeling joy that was undescribable.
yeah.
Um, so at the end of that birthday party, which was very normal, we were expected to go and take a bath. My mom's friend, I called her Aunt Alice, was a very stickler about that. No matter how much you have, you ought to be able to be clean.
Yeah.
So when I went up to take that bath, I was so excited. It was my birthday,
Yeah.
and it had been an amazing day. We had a old fashioned latch lock on the bathroom door. And I had not realized that I had gone in there to run my tub of water and get ready to take a bath and not latch the door. And that was a rule in her house. Nobody goes in the bathroom with anybody else.
Yeah.
And always lock the door. Um, so I could hear someone at the door. And I can remember going and looking at the lock and going just to lock the door. But the pressure that was coming from the outside of the door made it impossible for me to lock it. And all I can remember was Earl, which was the gentleman's name, pushing the door open and me falling in between the toilet and the tub with no clothes on because I was getting ready to take a bath.
Yeah.
And him leaning over me and me having that smell of urine engulfed me. That's all I could smell. And have you ever, for whatever reason, gotten so afraid that the hair on the back of your neck stands up?
Yeah.
Don't know why. He hadn't tried anything up to that point, but something told me I needed to be afraid.
Yeah. What did you do? That's really scary.
I just lay there. I didn't scream. And I think part of it now, in retrospect, I believe it was seeing my mother constantly being beat by my father.
Yeah.
And her accepting it. That mentality kind of rose up in me and I just froze. I should have yelled out. I should have screamed. I should have pushed. I should have done something. But all I could do is just lay there. And as I lay there, I can remember the smell of urine and my body going completely numb and then piercing pain. Because at that point, he is raping me.
Oh, my goodness.
And I remember him telling me, if you say anything to your mother, I'll call your dad. And being more afraid for my mother than, and being 8.
Yeah, that's so young. Yeah.
And my little, your mind's not focused enough. It's not rationalizing. So I kept my mouth shut and I didn't say anything, hoping, this was it. I can remember taking toilet paper after I didn't even take a bath, just taking toilet paper and blood running down my legs, sticking the toilet paper in my underwear, trying to stop the blood.
Yeah.
And going to bed. And now at this point, I'm sharing a bed with my mother and my sister because we're not at home. And I don't ever remember my mother asking me what happened. Are you okay? The normal
Did she
thing
know
you
about it?
expect a parent to say. Because in hindsight, I really believe she did know about it.
Okay.
But because she was so afraid of my father and being back into that life again, she was willing, her mind was operating out of flight or fight. And she chose the flight and she sacrificed me. And I hate to say it like that because I know it sounds horrible.
Yeah.
But I think she sacrificed my well-being in order to remain safe from my father.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, how horrible. And at 8, you didn't realize that, thank goodness. I mean, that,
No, and
but
at
as an
8,
adult, you can, I mean, because that would have added to the trauma, knowing that your mom knew about it and didn't help in some way. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. And
and
so, yeah.
it didn't. I mean, unfortunately, for the next 2 years, it intensified. I mean, it was not one rape, one molestation. It was an ongoing cycle where I heard he was the only job winner in that house at the time. So I can remember late at night hearing him and my Aunt Alice arguing and him threatening, well, I'll just leave.
Yeah.
And her saying, no, no, don't leave. Don't let her make you leave. And at that point, she began to be physically abusive to me because I think she felt like I can't stop him, so it has to be her fault.
Yeah.
Um, and so during that time, uh, being the youngest, because I was even younger than her kids, when she called us in for lunch, if I was the last one in, the last one who washed my hands, um, she would not let me eat for lunch. She would say, well, only strays come in at the last minute. So
Yeah.
you eat the crumbs from everybody's plate. And
Oh,
that was lunch.
yeah.
Or she would say things like, I don't want to see your face. And if I didn't clean my room, and it wasn't even just my room, it was my mother's room and my sister's room, but if it was not clean
Yeah.
to her specifications, or I didn't do something she asked me to do, she would literally make me sit in for hours in a hind catcher position.
Okay,
And
like a squat position or
yeah, squat down and, have my hands out. And if I cried, she would stuff rags in my mouth
oh, geez.
because she would be like, kids are to be seen, not heard.
Oh, that's taking
So,
it to the
and
extreme. Yeah.
yeah, and so, you know, it was horrible. But even at that time, and I really believe this, God sent me angels because I can remember when I was in third grade, Miss Black, I had developed a neurological disorder because of all of the abuse that I was going through. And literally, if I got scared, if I got nervous, my hands, it would start at my fingertips. I would go completely numb from my fingertips all the way to my feet, to my mouth, my eyes. I couldn't blink. I would just freeze.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's part of the
and
trauma. It sounds like
yeah,
it's related
and
to
it
that
was
trauma.
hard. It was my body trying to respond to what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it didn't matter what kind of trauma I was in. If it was a spelling test I hadn't studied for,
Yeah.
I would just go numb. And once she had figured out that, even though I don't know whether she knew or what, but when she figured out that I was struggling like to maintain myself, she would like give me spelling tests at lunchtime or during recess when nobody else was in the room.
Yeah.
She would take me to her house because, of course, this is when teachers could really care about their students without being accused of
Yeah.
doing anything wrong. But I can remember spending the weekends with her and getting my hair done and
Oh, that's good.
buying, going and getting, even though it was from the secondhand store, it was new to me.
Yeah.
Pants and things like that. And I really believe that was a saving grace that
Yeah.
God sent to just help me hold on, even in that very, very dark situation.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a wonderful thing she did, is taking you out of that
Yes,
situation, away from that abusive situation, to show you love and to care for you,
right.
to acknowledge that you're struggling and try to help you by just modifying your environment or showing you some kind of kindness, which you weren't getting at home. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful
And,
person.
and I want to jump out of the story real quick because of the last year she had become a counselor. And the last year that she counseled before she retired was my first year of teaching in the same school that she worked in. And we sat the first day of school and the first working day, and just cried because it was like she played it forward and it came all the way back around. And she got
Wonderful.
to see that she
Yeah.
actually did do something that had made a lifelong impact. So I
Okay.
know I kind of steered away from the story, but I just think that's important because sometimes we don't know when we're being kind to other people, how much that kindness means,
Yeah.
and how you could really be doing something that is going to save someone's life.
Yeah. So she
So it
really
may
had a
seem small to you, but it might be everything to someone else.
So you became a teacher at the same
Yes.
school where you went, where you met your that role model, that mentor.
Well, I became a high school teacher
Okay.
in the same district,
Okay, so
but
different
she
school
had
than high school.
became it was a high school where I became a teacher at. But when she became a counselor, she moved from the elementary to that high school. Never,
Okay.
and we never had run into each other, never had seen each other after that. But what she did for me had a lasting impact on my life, even for the career I chose
Yeah.
to recover in.
And how did you make it through the rest of your childhood living in with
Okay,
your
so I'll
mom?
come back into this story. So after the 2 years of just abuse, my mom finally got a job, and we just moved away. Which really, after I began writing my book, I really realized she must have known, because we didn't spend Christmas with them, we didn't spend birthdays with them. She didn't talk to them. We didn't talk to them. We didn't go over their house. Nothing.
Yeah.
It was like she totally, like it was like they had been erased from our existence.
Yeah. Once she got a job and was able to get you and your
Right.
sister out of there. Okay. She
Um,
erased them.
so I then when I turned 60, because I she spent a lot of time, and there were a lot of people who kind of my godfather, which was really a friend that my mother had met. He was a pastor, and he took me under his wings and began to just care about me and show me what real family life was supposed to look like. So he
Okay.
gave of himself without ever wanting anything back from me. So I really began to heal during that time.
Yeah.
So when I turned 16, um, another friend of my mother's had asked me if I would do some babysitting for her, which was something I usually didn't do, but it was her birthday and my mom kind of, pushed me into it, lovingly said, why don't you do this? It would be really nice. So while I was babysitting, everything seemed to be going fine when they left. But when they came back, she was obviously drunk. And
Okay.
she went up to her room. And then her husband came in. And he didn't go up to his room. He sat down in the chair next to the couch where I was laying. Now, I'm fully dressed. once burned, twice, you just are careful.
But that you're very, very careful around men, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah.
So I no short shorts, no inappropriate things. But the hair on my back of my neck stood up again.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. Because I knew what it was. I knew what was about to happen.
Yeah.
And but he didn't move. And so eventually I did drift off to sleep. And I woke up with him straddled across me. And myself feeling a breeze. So some of my clothes were missing.
So you didn't wake up during the time that he was taking off your clothes?
No, I didn't wake up. And
Okay.
I went to yell. And I remember I felt him like wad up, and I thought it was paper when it happened. Paper, and stuff it in my mouth.
Yeah.
And then he threatened me, like, if you say anything, I'll kill you while you're laying here.
Yeah.
And then he sexually assaulted me. And when he was done, it was like he just went upstairs.
Oh.
And I can remember rolling off of the couch and crawling into their bathroom that was downstairs. And what I noticed was that there was a in my mouth, which I thought was paper, was a $20 bill.
Oh my goodness. How demeaning.
And I can remember just moaning.
Yeah.
And crying and moaning and crying. And I remember taking toilet paper and cleaning myself off and trying to stuff the toilet paper in the bottom of the trash can.
Oh.
Underneath everything else.
Yeah.
And just moaning. And I crawled back out to the living room, and I didn't lay on the couch. I laid on the floor in a fetal position, and I could feel waves of pain and anger and disappointment and suffering and anxiety just wash over me.
Yeah.
And I tell people it was like I was being marked in my heart. It was like things got very, very dark at that moment. It was like there was no love, there was no light. I just lay there and cried and cried. When morning finally came, it felt like forever. I just asked to go home. I asked her, the wife, Pam, I was like, just take me home. Just take me home.
Because you couldn't get home on your own the night before, it sounded like, or you wouldn't have been there. Yeah. So you had to ask her to help you and get you home.
Yeah. And I didn't
say
talk
anything
to her. I just looked out the window and went home in total silence. And after that, I call it my dark, dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
I started doing drugs. I slept with, for real, a butcher knife underneath my pillow every night.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest, there were times I didn't know if I was going to harm someone else or if I was going to harm myself.
Yeah.
I was just so low.
Yeah.
I started being very, very promiscuous. I just felt like the world didn't care about me. I have been through all of this, not once, but twice. So obviously there's something wrong with me. I must have malfunctioned somewhere.
Yeah.
My godfather, I wouldn't talk to him. I totally shut him out of my life. Like, you know, all that stuff that you told me about God loving me and all that stuff, that's a lie. You know, he forgot about me.
Yeah. And that was the kind preacher or pastor that you met before, it sounded like.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually called him Pat Paul because that's what he was to me. But during this time, I like didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to hear him tell me, you know, you can do. I didn't want to hear any of that. I started hanging around kids that I knew were doing risky behavior, stealing things, you know, staying out all night. At that point, I think I was probably it was 16 when it happened. I was probably 17. I was going with a 48-year-old man.
Yeah. Well,
So
it sounds like you were pretty low. Like, what helped
yes.
get you out of that mode? Because obviously, you know, you're doing really well now, but what helped get you out of that mode?
So I had another teacher who actually teaches social studies, and that's what I teach, who told me, I refuse to see you destroy yourself.
Yeah.
And literally, he would, when I got suspended because I still was doing those kinds of crazy things, he would collect my work from other teachers and bring it to me. And he said, you know, one day he said, you will go to college. I don't care what your issue is, you're going to college. And the things lined up, and I was able to go to, and I had a child, but I was still able to, there was a college not far from that, in the city, not far from my house where I lived, and they had started a new program to help unwed mothers go to
Okay.
school. And so he was like, you're going to school. I don't care if I have to come knock on your door every day. For 5 years, you're going to school. So I went, and I met my husband. He's my husband now. And he was another godsend. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't cuss. He's like straight and narrow.
Good.
And first, when he first met me, he was like, I don't like he played football.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't like you. You know, you're just out to get a quick fix, whatever, will get you by. Because at that point I was taking drugs to get up, drugs to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Wasn't a very good mother. But it was like there were people who continue to surround me. And like my husband, we would go to parties, and he didn't drink and he didn't smoke and he didn't dance, but he would stand there and be like, you can dance with her, but don't touch her.
Yeah.
And he would take me home, after the party was over, and he'd be like, I just need to make sure you get in. And he would open the door, let me go. I mean, he wasn't trying to gain anything from me.
Yeah. So
it was more like he just kept giving and giving. And then once I decided to be a teacher, I will never forget, I sat in my advisor's office and I said, he said, what are you going to do? You can't stay here forever.
Yeah.
So I said, I want to be a teacher. And he said, well, you got to quit drinking because they're going to drug test you.
Yeah.
You can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do drugs.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a teacher, you can keep all the crazy and stuff that you want, but those three things have to stop.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking about what kind of impact they had made on me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could do that now, because I still get to be crazy. I just can't drink so much, and I can't do drugs, but
Yeah.
as long as
You just have to walk a straight and narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty straight and narrow path.
And so I did that, and once we both graduated at the same time, my husband was like, let's get married. So, I was like, okay, somebody who's willing to put up with my craziness, why not? Because I'm being triggered by everything.
So you weren't doing drugs, you weren't drinking, you stopped.
Well, I was drinking. I wasn't drinking to the degree that
you had been.
I had been. I stopped doing the drugs because I recognized that would show up on a drug test.
Yeah.
And that, and I really wanted to say thank you. That they were the people in my life that deserved to have me say thank you.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to do that, still crazy, lack of better words.
Yeah.
Still very,
So what advice would you tell people who have gone through this abuse and, are trying to make their life better? What would you tell women and girls in that position?
The first thing I would tell them was to look in the mirror and tell yourself it is not your fault. You didn't do anything that gave anybody the right to touch you, abuse you, call you names, emotionally stunt your growth. That you didn't do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to own it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I began to say myself, because then even after that, then another pastor came into my life, and he took me to the 12-step program.
Yeah.
And we began to read books books, and have counseling and talk about healing and how to heal. Yeah. And I actually, before the second man that abused me, I became an ordained minister and gave him I prayed for him the day before he died.
Yeah.
Came to his hospital room and prayed for him. And although it was crazy, crazy hard, and I kept wanting to smother him with the pillow.
Why? Why is that?
Well, because all of those old demons.
Oh, so the man who had abused you went to his hospital bed and prayed for him, is what you're saying?
Yes, because his daughter and I had remained close.
Okay.
And she had asked me, she's like, you're the only person that I know who is religious, as she put it. And I would like you to pray for my dad. And through a whole lot of prayer and conversations with my husband, and I sat down and said, okay.
So you were able to forgive the people that harmed you after everything. And what did that do for your soul? How did you feel after you were able to forgive these people?
After, and this is true, it was like their shadow came off of me. Because I remember after I prayed for him, I went to my car and I just screamed and hollered and screamed and kicked. And I know the people who were looking at me in the car next to me thought, oh my gosh, she's losing her mind. But in that process, I began to feel the sun.
Yeah.
I began to feel free. I learned, and this is no joke, it's not that it's over because it's a process, it's not a destination.
Yeah.
How to dance in the rain.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what happens, I'm able to say, evaluate it, look at it, and understand that it's a thing, it's not me.
Yeah.
And to find my peace in it.
Yeah.
And I call it dancing in the rain.
Yep. No, that's really good thing to call. Now, tell me what you're doing now to help other people. How are you paying it forward? You became a high school teacher in social science, it sounds like. You're
Yeah,
to
at first
other
I
women.
became like you said, a high school teacher. And at first and I would notice kids who I could identify with the triggers. So I see it and I was happy with just helping them. But I think it birthed a passion in me and a purpose. And so one day I went to the woman's shelter and I just said, I just didn't even know who I was supposed to talk to. I just was like, I want to talk to the director or whoever, because
Yeah.
I have a story to tell that is going to make a difference. So I started public speaking. I've been to the Ohio Senate and shared my story and got additional funding for crisis centers. I've talked in jails, I spoke at schools. And when I talk to young women, I kind of focus on, okay, if let's try to get you strong enough so that you don't wear that signal on your head that says you can be abused, because abusers will not abuse everybody. They look for a certain type. So
Yeah.
let's try to get you not to be that type so
Yeah.
that you don't have to experience it.
Yeah. So having strength, confidence, being able to
Right.
know that you are worthy of love and caring and not, because sometimes you can't, that they do look for the weak people, but sometimes even strong people they go after. But
Right.
just, yeah, just making sure you're doing everything you can to strengthen yourself.
And then how to find your voice. So even if you're that strong person, that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It didn't have anything to do with what you had on or what you said,
Yeah.
but it happens.
Yeah.
Then help you find your voice so that you can express it
Yeah.
and continue to move forward in your life. So I'm doing that. I've done a lot of life coaching because I meet women and I talk with them and I try to motivate them. And I find that they need someone to connect to that
Yeah.
they know will understand.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so true. And people, what do you do to help people that are walking alongside these people, maybe moms who have young daughters? How do you train them to recognize abuse? What would you have liked your mother to know at that time? Or how do you help moms?
I would like to tell I and actually I'm developing a training for that now because there are sons. Um, their daughter and or it could be their son
Or their son?
who is a
Yeah.
who is abused. There's a switch in behavior that I wish my mom would have seen. I went from being this very happy kid to a very depressed, full
Yeah.
of anxiety. So that should have been a trigger that she recognizes that something is wrong. So I want to spend time teaching and training parents and other caregivers that look for the signs, look
Yeah.
for the sign of anxiety, unable to control and regulate their emotions. Sometimes they go from being very clean kids to I don't. even, and I don't mean clean as in behavior, I mean hygienically clean.
Yeah.
To the kids that, they let themselves go. And it doesn't make any sense why it's happening. It possibly could have been that they've experienced some kind of assault. And it doesn't have to be a physical assault, it can be an emotional assault. Because kids are very cruel to kids.
Yeah.
And especially in this virtual age, will say things and threaten each other. And because adults are not on the same social media sites that these kids are, they don't realize that these kids are getting bullied. And that bullying is an emotional assault on them. And they need to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so important. The work that you're doing is training people to recognize when children are acting different, whether it's not taking care of their hygiene, their personal hygiene, because they're just so depressed. And that happens with depression, right? So it could be
Right.
bullying or sexual abuse, that they're depressed. So knowing the signs to look for in young children or children of any age, really, and how to intervene effectively where you're not putting them in even more harm's way. So that's really important work that you're doing. And is there anything else that you can think of that you want to mention about the work that you're doing to help survivors of abuse at this time?
Just that if you're out there and you're struggling and you need a helping hand, you just need someone to listen and to give you space to speak.
Yeah.
And to hear you. Please connect with me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Clubhouse, and I have a website. And I will hold that space for you because I truly understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Just reach out. I mean, it could just be a phone call, an email, a text message, whatever it may be. Reach out to somebody. And if you don't have
Yes.
that somebody, Marlisse is here to help you. That's a good thing to say, because there's some people that may not feel comfortable with anybody in their life, and just having you to talk to would be good. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Marlisse, for sharing your story. And I really appreciate it. It sounds like you've been through a lot, and you're helping other survivors get through even more things now. So we really appreciate it. You've been listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. Join us next week for another story of resiliency. And please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and feel free to leave me a comment or email me at catalystforchange20@gmail.com, or on Facebook, we have a page at Catalyst for Change Resiliency.